Have you ever thought why good people have a tough time while bad ones seem to have it easy? This question has confused many of us, a mystery that doesn't seem fair. This puzzle, the mystery of suffering, isn't new. It's as old as humans themselves, and people have thought about it in stories, ideas, and religious teachings for ages. One of the deepest thoughts about this can be found in a religious book called the Book of Job. This old book talks about the confusing question of why good people often face problems while those who are bad seem to get away with it. It's a story that deals with why we suffer, the idea of justice from God, and how humans react to hard times. The Book of Job gives us a different way to think about this problem, with ideas that are still useful in our everyday lives. Job, the main person in this old story, was known for having a lot of money and good character. People everywhere knew about how rich Job was, and he was well liked in his town. He owned many animals like sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys. But what made Job special was not his money, but his good character. He was honest and good, a man who worshipped God and stayed away from bad things. But as we go on with the story, Job's life changes a lot. He had to face a big challenge. One after another, bad things happened and Job lost all his money. His animals, his workers, and even his 10 children were taken from him. Still, Job didn't blame God. Instead, he fell to his knees and worshipped, facing the bad time just like he did the good. His problems didn't stop there. Job then got painful sores from his feet to his head. He was in a lot of physical pain, but he didn't give up. His wife told him to blame God and die, but Job said no. He stayed honest and kept his faith. Job's friends, trying to understand why he was suffering, came up with their own ideas. They thought maybe Job was being punished for doing something bad, or that God was testing him, or even teaching him a lesson, but Job didn't agree with them. He said he hadn't done anything wrong and asked God to explain why this was happening to him. Even during the worst of it, Job questioned God, but never his trust in God. He struggled with the idea of a good God letting a good man suffer. But even when he felt his worst, Job never lost his faith. His story is then just about suffering. It's about keeping faith when times are tough. Even in his saddest moments, Job kept his faith, showing how deeply he believed and how strong he was. Job's tough time wasn't a punishment, it was a test of his belief. This is a deep lesson we learn from Job's story. It shows us the idea of our faith being put to the test. A theme that is important in the tale. Job's story isn't only about one person's pain, but it's a story of unshakable belief and never giving up, even when life is very hard. Job's life was completely changed. He lost everything: his kids, his money, and his health. But he didn't blame God or question what was happening. He kept his faith, even when his friends thought his bad luck was because of his mistakes. In a world that often thinks being rich means being good, and suffering means being bad, Job's story tells us something different. It reminds us that hard times are not always because of something we did wrong. These times might be tests of our faith, meant not punish, but to improve and make us stronger. Job's story tells us to try to understand our experiences more deeply. When bad things happen, it's easy to ask, why is this happening to me? But Job's story wants us to ask, what can I learn from this? It helps us see our problems not as punishments, but as chances to grow and become more spiritually aware. Job's unchanging belief during his tough times shows how powerful belief can be. Even though he was in a lot of pain, he lost his faith. He didn't let his situation change how he felt about God. Instead, his faith changed how he reacted to his situation. Job's steady belief, despite his great pain, is a strong reminder of the power in strong belief. So Job's story isn't just about suffering, but a story about belief being tested, improved, and in the end, winning. The story of Job isn't just a very old tale, but a lesson that stays important over time. Even today, Job's story still is meaningful, touching people's lives and making sense to those dealing with their own troubles and trying to stick to their faith. It gives hope to people trying to figure out a big question that many people have asked for a long time. Why do good people have hard times? Job's story helps us tackle this question, not with easy answers, but with a deep way of looking at things that suggests we see hardship as part of life, a chance to grow, and a challenge to our faith. In our where troubles are often seen as a sign of messing up or being weak, Job's story stands as a strong example of how tough people can be and how lasting faith is. When things get tough, Job's story tells us to stay strong and reminds us that hard times are often challenges to our faith and toughness. The book of Job is an old story, but it teaches us important lessons that are still useful today. One lesson is about understanding suffering. It teaches us that when we have pain or troubles, it's not always because we've done something wrong. Sometimes they're just challenges that help us become stronger. Another important point is about keeping faith. Job's story shows us how important it is to stick to what we believe in, even when things get really tough. This is when we really find out how strong our faith is and what kind of person we are. Lastly, the book of Job shows us how powerful it is to keep believing. Even though he had a lot of challenges, Job never stopped believing. This shows us that staying true to what we believe in can give us a lot of strength, even when things are tough. So, like Job, let's remember to stay strong in our beliefs, knowing that when things get hard, it's not always because we've done something wrong, but often because we're being tested and made stronger.